All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, regardless of the billions of reasons that our people have to work together to unify and do what we have to do, we still have to see scenario after scenario happen for us to decide to do anything about it. Now, out in South Carolina, there was a 86-year-old man that the police was forced to use a taser on. Now, Albert Chatfield, who suffers from Alzheimer's, is another clear example of how they feel about you and the amount of respect that they have for us. Now, let's see what could have possibly caused this 86-year-old man, Albert Chatfield, to be tased by the police.
Drive, I'll call it. We'll be out with something. Hey! Alright, stop! You stop! No, you got to shoot. Stop! Alright? No, you take stop! Stop! Tase me! Stop! Tase me! You gonna stop me! Stop! No! Okay! Stop! You gonna stop me! Stop! Alright! You gonna stop me! Tase him! Tase him! Tase him! Central, I'm trying to get on the radio. We on Brooks and Main. Taser deployed. Subject in custody. Being arrested for taser deployment. Get him up out the street. Catch your breath. You all right? You all right? Get him on the room. Ready? Pearson, move my car. Move my car out the street. All right, we need you to get up so we can move you out the street, okay? Come on and work with me. Stand up. Stand up. Put your feet down. All right, sit in there. Sit right there on your butt. Let's go through, notify EMS, but because it's also going to have the last issue report. How old are you? How old are you, sir? Sir, breathe. How old are you? That was rather than fight him out there in the street. I understand. That's the purpose of me telling you go ahead and take. I understand. He's got the loud verbal command several times. He's not followed through the loud verbal command. Pearson, come help me get these cars up the road.
No, put me.
Huh?
Put me down.
Put
me down. Help
we
me.
We're trying to help you, okay?
Wait, let me down.
Okay. Hold on. I'm going to get you on the bed here. You got an elderly male.
Put me down. Hey, bud.
Causing traffic problem.
Get me over. Get me over.
Carter wouldn't respond. He wouldn't respond.
Stop.
He got in the car.
Down.
He decided he wouldn't stop.
No, sit down.
He finally stopped seeing. He jumped out the car trying to subdue him by hand without having to hurt him.
Yeah. he's fighting. We got traffic coming up the street. We're trying to chase him and stop him. So we end up having to tase him to keep him from getting any further hurt. And he's got a laceration on the front of his head and one right here on the back. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. He's probably got, I'm sure he got a wallet in his pocket. He's probably about 70. Yeah. He's normally very outspoken. Y'all pay standoffish. Y'all pay schoolhouse a while back saying that one of our officers traffic collision paperwork. He's very outspoken. You can't tell him different. He's right about it. You think he's hard-headed, or you think he's very hard-headed? Take your hands. Hey, y'all, you all right? What happened? I went. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're going to take you to the hospital, okay? Yes, sir. Give me a second, okay?
Did we find out why he was running?
All right. Monday morning. Just give me a second. It's going to hurt just a little bit, okay? 1, 2, 3. All right.
That one's already out.
1. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Okay, back out, baby. Calm down.
Catch camera.
It's on.
Nope.
This one, right? Alright.
Well, hey, calm down, baby. So you take your shirt off, okay?
Hold on a second.
Hold on.
Thank you.
Can you sit up?
Yeah, thank you.
I turned it on as soon as before you start pulling.
So this man, Officer Stephen Sweikata, says he tased this 86-year-old man for his own safety. He was forced to tase this man because he didn't want to get hit by a car. So apparently Albert Chatfield was driving his car erratically, running through red lights, and he didn't pull over right away. And when he finally did get out of the car, they said he was getting out of the car dazed and confused, which is expected of someone who has Alzheimer's, and that he wasn't following their commands, which I guess is like the ultimate sin in America, punishable by death or at least severe injury. So they say that Albert Chatfield was backing into traffic, and the only way that they could subdue this 86-year-old man was to tase him. And when he was tased, that's when he fell to the ground and hit his head, which led to him suffering from bleeding from the brain and a broken nose.
An 86-year-old who was tased by police in Kingstree in Williamsburg County 4 days ago is still in intensive care. The police officer says he used his taser to stop the man from being hit by traffic. But Brad Stryker tells us the man's family is upset and wants justice.
Jody Mack will never look at this intersection the same way.
I can't understand. It's not justified.
She's talking about what happened to her father, Albert Chatfield. 4 days ago, Chatfield was stopped by police at this intersection in Kingstree.
He was backing away with his hands up, and then he was tasered.
To find out exactly what happened here, I requested a copy of the police report from the Kingstree Police Department. Unfortunately, no one responded to my request, but I did manage to get a copy of the report from the family's attorney. In it, Officer Sweikata reports that Chatfield made several U-turns and ran a red light trying to avoid his patrol car. After Chatfield stopped and got out, he was walking back toward traffic. Sweikata says he used the taser because he was worried Chatfield would be hit by that traffic.
This is the place where it happened. I'm devastated by this whole thing.
Devastated especially because she doesn't think it had to happen.
If you don't see a gun, I don't see it necessary to pull a taser.
Chatfield was taken to the hospital after he was tased. He's been in intensive care ever since. The family says his condition is only getting worse.
Right now, the main concern is Mr. Chatfield.
This is Caesar McKnight, the family's attorney.
There was some carelessness on the part of the police department.
He says they're considering taking legal action, but for now, filing a lawsuit isn't their top priority. They just want to see Chatfield recover.
I'm praying. I'm not hoping, I'm praying that he gets better.
Prayers she hopes are answered soon. In Kingstree, I'm Brad Stryker, Live 5 News.
We sent multiple emails and phone calls to the King Street Police Department asking for a comment, the police report, and body cam footage of the incident. No one responded to any of our requests.
Now, I don't know how many people have actually dealt with anybody who has Alzheimer's. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. And anybody who's ever dealt with it knows how difficult it is to deal with. But of course, not following the police officer's commands is a death sentence waiting to happen, regardless if you got dementia or not. They hopped out and told this 86-year-old man, not knowing whether he has Alzheimer's or not, to get down on the ground. And after he didn't do that, they said he resisted being put in the handcuffs and taken to the sidewalk. And people with Alzheimer's do have that sort of response sometimes when you try to deal with them. But for these fully trained, tax-paid police officers to decide that the only course of action was to taser this man, to subdue him in order to help him out, do you think they would do that to somebody who looks like their father? No, but they have no problem doing it to this man. And the police don't even issue a statement about it. But the point is, if they can do this to this senior citizen, to this elder in our community, what would they do to black men in their 20s and 30s? Or black women, or even black children? Nothing is off limits with them. We can't be begging them for justice. We have to be the ones that protect Albert Chatfield. Now, luckily, this man didn't die, and hopefully he does recover. But the police, so-called protecting him, put him in intensive care. They had to put this man in an induced coma, thanks to the police looking out for him. And if you think there aren't people in these terrorist organizations intentionally going out to join the police force, then you are sadly mistaken. And if police officers can get away with murder or brutality, how do we know the good ones from the bad ones? Because they all seem to be immune. But instead of complaining, they are in the position that they are in, and they respond more urgently than we do. If they go out and join police forces, there's no reason why we shouldn't go out to join the police forces to try to stop the situation from happening from on the scene. If not, just create our own police organization just to protect our own community from whoever. These people in these terrorist organizations have no problem running for political office, and enough people support them that these racist officials keep getting elected over and over. There's no reason why we shouldn't be running for local offices in our own areas to control the local politics in our area, to control the DA in our area, the city council, the mayor. These people do group economics because they learn how to put their tribalism to the side. Now, we are in a position where we have no other choice but to do group economics to get out of the situation that we're into, but we still have problems with tribalism. We're still divided over simple things. When our brothers are shot or incarcerated left and right, when our sisters are being shot, when our kids, our elderly are being shot, we still arguing amongst each other. In my opinion, we already have enough motivation, enough reasons to work together. We all agree that we don't want this happening to old men in our community. We don't want our children to be targeted. We don't want to be targeted ourselves. We want our children to have a future of financial independence. We have enough things to agree upon to put our tribalism to the side. And our ancestors left us the blueprint on all of the major areas that we need to accomplish in order to achieve our goals. All we have to do is just follow them. When we realize all we got, then maybe we can get somewhere. But if centuries of the same thing isn't motivation enough, I don't know how much more it'll take.
All right, so there you have it. There are very, law enforcement is a dangerous profession. I'm the son of lifelong law enforcement officers. My mother just retired from law enforcement. And it is very dangerous. and we understand that, but there are very, very real consequences to these interactions. And this is a perfect example, and you have been able to see some of what the end result is when law enforcement officers don't have don't have adequate training and don't have an adequate understanding of when it is appropriate to use force. So at this point in time, I'll open up and I will take any questions. Jody right now is not going to take any, but the floor is you all.
When you look at that video, obviously this case was settled very quickly. Is that the reason why?
I think this case was resolved very quickly because of all the facts and circumstances. Of course, the video plays a role because there are no questions about what actually happened. And this is a recent phenomenon, so to speak, because there have been instances of citizen law enforcement interaction that go on where there is no video, right? But having videos helps parse through the weeds. It's also a perfect example of the plight of body cameras, right? Because as you know, in the wake of the killing of my other client, Mr. Walter Scott in North Charleston, South Carolina became the very first state in the country with mandatory body camera legislation. And body cameras work, but they only work if they're in working condition and if you cut them on, right? Here we were fortunate to have the entire event transpire in front of a police dash camera. But what if it wasn't? What if it occurred off camera, right? These are questions that a lot of citizens and communities have to deal with. Fortunately for Mr. Chatfield, he doesn't. But I think it was a mix of the officer's written report, which by its very nature, in our opinion, deems the actions unconstitutional under the precedent set by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, the video, as well as the nature and severity of his injuries.
Well, he appears to be, as you mentioned, walking away and kind of disoriented. So why not go for, why don't you want criminal charges?
Very poor decision making isn't always necessarily criminal. You know, the solicitor's office in this instance did a thorough investigation. I have to commend Solicitor Finney's office on this. He is backing away, right? And you'll see when you have the opportunity to analyze the tape. There are a lot of things that could arguably open to perception. I don't necessarily agree, right? I don't see anything on the tape myself that allows anybody to say that Mr. Chatfield was aggressive or this reference in the report to a fighting stance, right? I see no fighting stance on the video. You know, it also speaks to part of the problem when looking at whether to charge officers, and more importantly than the charge is whether or not you can convict them, right? We live in a society where the average person finds it hard to believe that an officer could act with the necessary criminal intent, right? The mens rea to do something. You know, in Walter Scott, Officer Slaker, who shot an unarmed man in the back as he ran away, and yet the criminal justice system was unable to convict an officer of murder. Had it been a regular citizen, it would have definitely been an easy conviction. You know, most recently there's a group who has proposed this idea that states, including South Carolina, create a separate criminal charge, right, for the unconstitutional, unlawful use of force, right, which will parse out the intent for assault and battery, right? The intent for manslaughter or involuntary manslaughter or murder. You know, but in this instance, the decision lies with the solicitor, and we respect his decision. Whether we necessarily agree or not is a different story.
My dad was very active. He supported everything we did as a family. My dad was like my best friend. We would go to games together. We would go to breakfast together. That Saturday morning, we had breakfast together. My dad and I, we would go to church together. He was very active. I don't have that anymore. My dad would dance with me.
So do you have to feel? I mean, what is his day? What is today like for him?
It's a long process. It's not what it was, but he will never be the dad I had before this. He requires to be fed. He cannot stand up on his own. As you can see, he clearly got out earlier, walking himself. He can't do that anymore. He can't even stand up because his foot, when he was dragged out of the street, his foot now is basically turned as to where he can't even balance himself. He has nightmares. He's up all night. We have round-around clock shifts with him. He's not able to have a full conversation with me anymore. At the beginning, he couldn't even speak. The only thing he said was, "Lord, help me." As he was crying out there, a day after that, he couldn't even speak. He can't eat. He was on liquids. He was on what they call thickened liquids because things would get into his lungs. He couldn't swallow. So I don't have the dad I had before. And I may never have him again.
Huh? No, I just want to, as long as you know, I'm good. I mean, it's only that. You know. So when I get an infection, I'm an old man. I know. It's okay. I hope.
Right there where the police was just right there.
They talked to you?
Yeah, they said we couldn't get through because somebody had to share it.
No.
This is a green Toyota.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, where do you live?
I stay on 12th Avenue, 207.
12th and what?
12th and 1st.
That's your ID? Did they talk to you yet?
Whoa. Yeah, they already talked to me. Why do you need my ID?
Who?
Why do you need my ID?
You're driving the car, that's why I need your ID.
What did I do?
Park. I need everybody's ID.
What?
Everybody's ID.
Whoa. God.
Yo, you stupid as fuck, sir.
No, no.
I'm about to start recording this shit.
Better watch your language.
Get that film.
I'm about to start recording this shit.
Yeah, start recording it. Cut that phone off right now.
No, I have right. I'm not intimidated. I have right. Sir, I'm recording your ass. The fuck you gonna do? Bitch, you on camera. Fuck wrong with you, stupid ass cracker.
This cracker, bro, you see how quick he ran to try to stop us when we turned?
Fuck, bro.
And he already pulled out his fire. He holding the fire shit. He was about to nah, bro. What the fuck?
Hey, get the paper.
My memory ID somewhere, dog.
Where you at? Come be on camera, sir. What's your badge number, sir?
606.
What's your name, sir?
Right there, Danish. Danish.
What's your name, sir?
Oh shit.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car.
Damn. What the?
Get out of the car.
Oh shit. What the fuck?
Use your hands. Put your hands on the fucking thing. Put them on the thing. Put them right there. Put them right there.
Whoa.
Keep them right there. I'll put it around your ass so quick.
What?
What did I do?
Hands on the thing.
9 Investigates has uncovered 2 Groveland police officers could be in hot water for allegedly using excessive force against an 11-year-old girl.
They responded to a burglar alarm at a home in Groveland, and the girl says they forced her to the floor at gunpoint. Channel 9's Anthony DiLorenzo found out both officers have a history of trouble at the department.
The 2 officers came in through the garage door, reportedly let themselves into the house with guns drawn, responding to that burglary alarm. This soft-spoken 11-year-old, who we're not identifying, was on her bed watching TV and says she found herself in fear on the ground at gunpoint.
One of the officers was pushing me down, and when he was pushing me down, he put his knee on me, and then the other officer still had his gun pointed at me.
Their response was over a burglary alarm that was accidentally tripped. Ginger Rand wants to know how anyone could think his little girl was such a threat.
Someone should get fired for doing something like that to an 11-year-old.
After relaying his concerns to the chief and Eyewitness News began asking questions, Groveland police launched an internal affairs probe into possible use of excessive force. Career cops James Festa and John Rigdon have been with the department 3 years. I got a look at their personnel files today and found out they've been disciplined several times. Officer Festa was reprimanded this past December for botching a child abuse investigation. He's also been suspended in 2013 for sleeping on the job. Officer Rigdon was suspended last May and demoted in 2013 from corporal. Brass also reprimanded him in 2011. All 3 times he allegedly filed false police reports. Gerund wants IA investigators to scrutinize Sunday's police report, which contains nothing about his daughter's terrifying account.
She's traumatized by it.
Police are set to interview the little girl about what happened here on Monday.
Can you tell me what you were doing on Sunday afternoon?
I was laying in my bed and I was watching TV, and then I heard a voice and I thought it was my dad and his friend, Mr. Rob. And so then I didn't open the door or go out the room, and then the door slammed open, and then the 2 police officers yelled at me and told me to put my hands up, and then they told me to get on the ground while the one officer was telling me to do that while the other officer had his gun pointing at me. So then I went on the ground, and then as I was going on the ground, one of the officers was pushing me down, and when he was pushing me down, he put his knee on me, and then the other officer still had his gun pointed at me, and then they asked me if I was the owner of the house, and I said no, and then they got off, and then the other police officer got off me, and then that's when they went out in the hallway to go to my dad's room.
And how did that make you feel?
I was sad and scared.
And how long did this last for? Just a few seconds?
It was like, all of it was like almost like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Did they make you cry at all by what they did?
When I went to my dad's room, I started crying because I was very scared and didn't know what to do or what had happened.
Have you ever seen anything like that before, like on TV, or have you ever seen anyone do that to anyone before?
No, not really.
That was the first time you ever heard of police officers having to do something like that?
No. I've heard of it before, but I never really saw it on TV or it happened to me before or any of my other families.